to say it out loud.
Twilight made me love movies again. I think it's a good movie, and before tough men throw tomatoes at me, I'll try to explain why the vampire saga in its time got an undeserved big wave of hate. To love Twilight was considered something shameful. How can you enjoy this misunderstanding that is a desecration of literature, cinema and common sense? But despite the disproportionate hate, films and even more so the book raise very relevant issues for teenagers. This is the answer to quiet natural cures. For all the naivety and awkwardness, the root of the story is a classic ancient eternal motif. But first things first. What do we know about Bella Swan? Her parents divorced when the girl was a few months old. She spent only a couple of weeks a year with her father. As Dad is married to work and fishing, there is absolutely no connection between Charlie and Bella. They spent rare and brief moments together in silence, throwing fishing rods into the water. She doesn't know her father, she doesn't know what to say to him, and she calls him Charlie behind his back. All they have in common is this couple of vacations in California and one Christmas together when the girl was 4.
Yeah, Waylon, she hasn't had a Christmas here since she was 4.
Bella's mommy is a completely flightly woman, and she married Phil, a minor league baseball player. Bella likes her stepfather, he's a nice guy with good musical taste, but the problem is that Phil constantly has to move around the country, and Bella's mother accompanies Phil on these business trips. Bella as a teenager is under constant stress, feeling completely alone and unwanted. Young parents in love had a child, then divorced and completely immersed in their personal life. Bella considers herself a liability, and in one of her mother's long journeys, Bella decides to move from Phoenix to Forks. She adores sunny Phoenix, loves the heat, desert landscapes and cacti, and hates the ever-rainy Forks. Hates damp, cold and hundreds of shades of green. Green treetops, green moss on trunks, the ground and even the sky here seems green. The main nuance is that Bella doesn't tell us about all this. She doesn't explain why she moved from her beloved Phoenix to the dreadful Forks. That is a question we must ask ourselves. The explanation appears only on page 29 of the book and 17 minutes into the film when Edward decides to talk to her. He is telepathic and he can read anyone's mind except Bella's. For some reason he can't read her thoughts, but in spite of that, he hits the nail on the head and he guesses what she's thinking and what she's feeling. He's the first person in Bella's life who really takes an interest in her situation and decides to talk about it. Bella is accompanied by the routine of a divorced child. The move, the new school, the feeling of inferiority, alienation, irrelevance and the fear of not being accepted. She tells Edward that she didn't want to go to Forks, where she hates the cold and she doesn't get along with Charlie. Her moving is a desperate attempt at coping with loneliness. Waking up the next morning after talking to Edward, Bella discovers that she no longer suffers from loneliness. Now she is enjoying it because deep down she knows she's not alone anymore. Someone in this world cares about her. The story reveals the theme of teenage experiences, fears of maximalism, becoming a person, outsiders, the desire to be special, accepted, chosen from the crowd. Bella considers herself a grey mouse, unworthy of anything more, and Edward is her wildest dreams. He is perfect in every way, he is smart, he is well brought up, he's got great hair, he's got a nice six-pack, he knows a lot of foreign languages and he plays the piano. He also responds for her need for care. He is a clear example of how a man can and should dream of something greater, that there is a room for something other than the routine of eternal loneliness. And then, the whole movie and the whole book just savor the way people look at her with Edward. How their classmates get jealous, how her girlfriends ask her about dates, how Bella falls asleep and looks forward to seeing Edward tomorrow. The desire to be special is perfectly natural for teenagers. They are under constant pressure and a pile of public expectations. Expectations of parents that turn into their own expectations. Teenage drama touches the deepest fears and experiences of girls and boys. For example, the Divergent trilogy, though written much weaker than Twilight, touches on the important topic of classification and caste. This is the answer to teenagers who at 14 or 16 years old don't know where to go until they finish school and make the difficult choices that will determine their life. Not everyone is destined for a great path and a special status, and it's understandable that young people want to feel important, feel that life will not stop after graduation, feel that they have a choice and that university or that job that they choose will not be the final point in their lives. The factions in Divergent are a metaphor for lack of social mobility and social gain. Everyone wants to believe that they can belong to something bigger than the faction in which they were born. A plumber's kid wants to believe he can go to the same college as a politician's kid. Divergent says only a few can break through the social stratum and make it to the next league. This is an ancient dream. The street urchin will always dream of being inside the walls of the palace.
I wonder what it'd be like to live there. And have servants and valets.
The dream of a sparkling vampire is no different from the dream of a beautiful prince or princess. That's why I claim it's a classic motif. Because Twilight is another variation of a subject of Cinderella today. The earliest version of a Cinderella story was discovered on Egyptian papyri. Its prototype was Rhodopis, who lived in the 6th century BC. The fairy tale tells of a slave brought from Thrace to Egypt. The god Horus as a falcon stole one of her sandals and took it to the king in Memphis. Amazed by the size and shape of the sandals, the king sends people to search for her mistress. She was found and brought to Memphis, where she became the king's wife. The most famous version of Cinderella was written in 1697 by Charles Perrault. It was the story of the same Cinderella from the attic who tried on the crystal slipper. Edward is a perfect classic prince from the fairy tale. And at the end of the Cinderella story, as in Twilight, there must be a ball. Bella comes to the ball with Edward, but instead of wearing crystal, she wears a plaster slipper. The same dreams, fantasies, images. The same motifs wander in folklore and take new forms and shapes, adapting to the modern reality. Gods, pharaohs, knights, musketeers, vampires. This dream will exist as long as people live. Because there will always be princes and beggars, there will always be Cinderella dreaming of going to the great ball and dancing with Prince Charming. People will always want something more and dream. Dream about money, power, influence, and teenagers will always dream of some kind of recognition. In the second part, Stephanie Meyer is already openly referring to the classics. Bella reads Romeo and Juliet, and Edward quotes Shakespeare in class. And in the end, like Romeo, thinking that his beloved is dead, Edward goes to face death. Stephanie Meyer goes even further and writes about whether Cinderella has managed to get along in the world of princes and princesses. Is the dream of a sparkling vampire more stupid than any other dream? Is it necessary to review the story episode by episode in search of flaws and absurdities? But even here, when you look at it, most stupidity has an explanation and is the context of one big fantasy. One of the main concerns for the film is the acting. Bella looks silly and awkward, but this is how lovers behave. Edward looks weird too, because all he thinks about is Bella's fresh pulsating blood. The book Midnight Sun shows us all the same Twilight events, only from Edward's point of view. The first 30 pages he literally goes on and on about how he kills Bella, how he drinks her blood, how he kills the witnesses of his classmates. The book also talks about the color of vampires' eyes. If the eyes are red, then the vampire has recently drunk human blood. If the eyes are golden, then it was animal blood. If the eyes are black, then the vampire is hungry and thinks only of blood. In the most embarrassing scenes, Edward's eyes are black. Just because actors play characters that behave foolishly doesn't mean the actors themselves are bad. The characters form an unusual chemistry. They are really in love. The story tells us that people do not choose what to feel for and to whom.
At least they seem happy.
Yeah, some people are just lucky, I guess.
Lucky? None of them belong to themselves anymore. And the sickest part is, their genes tell them they're happy about it.
Another of the viewer's main concerns is why a 100-year-old vampire should go to school. The first reason is his legend to the locals. to show that he is not different from the ordinary man. The most prosaic reason is because the author of the book needed to bring a sophisticated, beautiful vampire to the schoolgirl for whom this story was written. Yeah, it's really stupid, but no dumber than a billionaire in a rubber suit. It's kinda like, what if my classmate turned out to be a vampire? Why don't we just back off the teenagers and their romance?
Oh, to be young and to feel love's keen sting. Well, come away, everybody.
When I read the books, I had the feeling that Stephanie Meyer was Bella. This is an unknown gestalt, it's her forgotten dreams, her experiences. They felt so fresh, thoughtful and well described that there was no doubt that Meyer had written the story for herself and the same ordinary and inconspicuous girls. Robert Pattinson, after a conversation with Stephanie Meyer, said that the writer had a genuine love for Edward. If you compare Twilight with the 50 Shades of Grey, that was inspired by the vampire saga, it becomes clear how cute and naive Twilight is. Just a sweet pink fairy tale without a hint of vulgarity. It is normal to compensate for certain needs through literature and film. And here we have to ask ourselves, is it stupid to have a movie that shows different, naive teenage dreams and never worked out injuries? Why does this story have to be more than just a dream for girls? And even if you are in your 30s, it is normal to immerse yourself in fairy tale and play along with it to experience the full range of emotions. Why are the problems of teenagers are considered insignificant? Denying them doesn't solve these problems. Teenagers should not be ashamed of their emotions and should not be ashamed of the dream of a shining beauty, much less of the love for Twilight. At the beginning of the video I said that Twilight made me love movies again, and I say this without a drop of a sarcasm. Now the internet is just full of content, and we are forming a very strange attitude towards it. Like, content has to be worthy of us, it has to earn our attention, it has to satisfy all our desires. In pursuit of the best, we have devalued all good. Algorithms of social networks and services select for us the most suitable digested content. We only watch what suits our taste, and our taste is now determined by the machine. The neural network chooses what we watch tomorrow, what comes up in the recommendations, what story would potentially have good numbers. Big studios now focus only on statistics and forecasts, and often these are artificial dead plots. I went through a few dozen pages of movies on one of the famous services, and nothing could satisfy my requests. I spent half an hour on this. The film had to fit criteria that I didn't even know. I realized that my brain requires the usual gum, what I already know, something that doesn't require my efforts or my involvement. My brain demands a film similar to what I've seen before and what I liked. And then I saw Twilight. I knew it was just a fairy tale for young and naive girls, and I just wanted to experience those emotions. They are specific and not like anything. I didn't expect the film to satisfy me, but I enjoyed it myself. I created this mood myself, plunged into it, played along. I loved.
And let's face it, I am hotter than you.
Sometimes caught a lot of grief, a lot of sympathy, quoted Edward, ate too much ice cream, and I wasn't ashamed to experience the creeping goosebumps from the final scenes of the last film. It was beautiful, like I spontaneously dropped by for a bachelorette party where everyone was happy to see me. Then I started watching horror movies, even though I never liked them. And I felt myself again in the era of VHS tapes, when you just take off the shelf something random, unusual or unknown and watch this movie without giving it any rating, not dividing movies into good and bad, smart and stupid. Even today Twilight looks very brave and original. They have their own charm and aura, and for some it is like a personal brand of drug. You can feel it's a story the author really wanted to write and make movies with. It's not perfect, it's not deep, it's not a masterpiece, and what's more important, the saga has a lot of drawbacks. In some places the plot fades, sometimes wrinkled, somewhere there wasn't enough time to show scenes from book that were not shown in the film. But the first two parts are adorable, and they taught me to appreciate every movie. And to the haters of Twilight, I have only one question.
Why so serious?
Once a year you can believe in Santa Claus or the fairy tale of vampires. Real emotions are just spontaneity. Who knows, maybe tomorrow I'll be enjoying the Fast and the Furious saga. This is like a choice between a burger and a pizza, between a walk in the park and a nightclub. Sometimes you just want to turn on a good movie and relax, and Twilight is just such a movie.
Beautiful. This is the skin of a killer, Bella.